Peace, Israel, and Yah bless. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is truth. The title of this lesson will be List Them Mine Enemies, the Enemies Without, Part 2. Once again, this lesson is entitled List Them Mine Enemies, the Enemies Without, Part 2. Now, we know good and well that the house of enemies, we have enemies within and we have enemies without. The enemies without are those who are not of the house of Israel, who are not of the bloodline of, they're not of the bloodline of Jacob. They are enemies. So we're going to go down a list of our enemies, and anyone that is in cahoots against us or anyone that claims to be us, try to remove us out of our place and take our stead, they are enemies unto us, and we are to be mindful of them. All right, brace yourselves, tighten up your jaws. Do not turn to the left or to the right, or you will get hit in the mouth. We are to walk the straight and narrow way of the Most High's commandments. Now, let's deal with our enemies. We will start off at Psalms chapter 83. Psalms chapter 83. And we will read all of Psalms chapter 83. And chapter 83 of Psalms verse 1 reads, Keep not thou silence, O Yah, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O Yah. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. All the enemies of the Most High are enemies of the Most High's people. Verse 3, they have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. So our enemies have come up with crafty counsel, laws, underhanded, backdoor deals in order to keep the children of Israel cut off, confused, lost, and in disarray. Verse 4, they have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. So the people who are doing this, the people who have done this and continue to do this, they are doing this with despiteful minds. That means that they know good and well exactly what they're doing. They know good and well what they hope the end result would be, and they know exactly who they're doing this thing to. So this is a plan, orchestrated plan. This is not an accident. Verse 5, for they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. These nations are in cahoots. They are in confederate against the Most High. So therefore they are in confederate against his people, against his hidden ones, against his chosen. So if you ever wonder why, or wondered why, when you move from one nation to the next, from one state to the next, you've got a group of people that hate you, would absolutely go out of their way to harm you, will go out of their way to make it known they have absolutely no desire to have you around and have no love for you, is because these people are all in cahoots, one consent, from one nation to another. All these nations have conspired against you. That way, when you go from France to England, England to Germany, Germany to Spain, Spain to Russia, Russia to Italy, Italy to Greece, it doesn't matter where you go, the sentiment against you happens to be the same, because all of those nations have made a confederate. They've made a league against you, O Israel. Verse 6, and these are the nations that took this oath together to actually try to cut you off, all right, and to make sure that you would not be we would be a nation. So we were split in such a manner that, and separated, given different names, speaking different languages, totally not being able to communicate with each other, all right, because we've been scattered throughout the whole earth, all right. So we were not allowed to be a nation, to be one collective in thought or in action, because we were given so many different doctrines that were false and they were hurtful to our people. And furthermore, they separated us from the Most High more and more, because these doctrine of these nations were vanity, and they were certainly an abomination to the Most High. Verse 6, the tabernacles of Edom, Edomites. These were the chiefs in this thing. Okay, the Ishmaelites, those Arabs. That's why they can't stand you either. Of Moab and the Hagarenes. 7, Gabal and Ammon and Amalek. Those are the Amalekites. The Philistines were the inhabitants of Tyre. Assur also is joined with them. They have harpened the children of Lot. Selah. Verse 9. Do unto them as unto the Midianites, and to Sisera, and to Jabin, at the brook of Kison. Now, Sisera was killed, the Midianites were killed, so when he's asking the Most High to do unto them, to the enemies of the Most High, as he done unto these people, is to kill them. Let's be clear. Verse 10, which perished at Endor, they became as dung for the earth. Verse 11, make their nobles like Oreb, and like Zeb, yea, all their princes as Zebah and as Zalmunna. Verse 12, who said, let us take to ourselves the houses of Yah in possession. Now let's make this clear. Once we are reading this book, and we are in the Book of Remembrance, we are to use discernment while reading this book. And if your heart is in the right place, the Most High will allow you to make the corrections, that when our enemies printed this up, all their lies will be exposed to you, and all their errors will be exposed to you. And if it's not exposed to you directly, an Israelite will be enlightened to where he will show you where those errors are. So here we're looking at verse 12, and it states simply that our enemies decided, they said, you know what? Let us take ourselves, let's take to ourselves the houses. Most High doesn't have houses. Most High have one house. One house. So this S needs to be removed. It is out of place. So they wanted to take the house of the Most High in their possession. They did that. What our enemies did was this. They came through Jerusalem, killed us off. We were in a siege. We were in a strait. We were eating our own children. That's how bad it was. We tried to flee down into Africa. Those of us who were escaped and tried to flee, those Edomites turned us over, got us killed. Romans took over. Now, all our scrolls, what was not burnt, was kept. What is kept is now translated. And it was translated because we would be in the many lands of our enemies. And we would be speaking the many different languages of our enemies. But before we were even able to read, the Most High said he would have made us blind, and he would have made us deaf in these nations. For so many years, for centuries, we have been nothing but a bunch of dummies in the midst of our enemies. We were not even able to read. We were illiterate people. The Most High stripped us of our knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. You could show us a book and we couldn't read it. We could not read the book. So therefore, when they took these scrolls, they took the best and the brightest of us, and they were able to translate it into these many different languages. I have told you in times past that sometimes the things that you are taught, the things that you may see, and the things that you learn, they may be for a time to come. It's not always something that may benefit you right there, right then, but it has an importance somewhere along the line, and it may not necessarily be right there at that moment. So what our enemies have done, as we were kicked out of Jerusalem, the temple is burned, Okay, and desecrated and all manner of foulness. These heathen were not allowed into the Most High's temple, but the Most High caused them to do all of this because he said he would remove us from his sight, and he said clearly he would have that temple removed as well. That happened. They burnt it down, totally destroyed it. We ran out, kicked out. Okay, those of us who are not killed, we are chased into other nations and we are captives. Now, the Romans took a hold of this text, translated this text. It's been sent throughout the earth in many different languages. It was important when the Romans, who are Europeans, when they took this text and they were conquering the many lands. Keep in mind, the many lands of the earth are owned and controlled by people who look like me, from the Pacific on through all these many different lands. Dark people, people of dark hue, run these nations. So if you're going to conquer a people, it's important that you establish yourself as the provider and the authority over them. And there's no way to do that more easily than for you to establish the new authority as a God figure. So you have where Caesar Borgia, okay, who is the son of Pope Alexander VI, they painted this man and sent him throughout the earth and deemed him to be the Son of God, aka JC. And our people have grabbed the hold of this vanity, a hold of this nonsense. It's an error, and we have placed it on our necks, in our cars, in our homes, and bow and kiss it and things of the like, having no idea that these individuals got into the Most High's temple, took our records, and totally took the book and flipped it around. Totally flipped it around, plagiarized it, and tried to place a Roman idol in the place of the Most High. And that's what they did when they took the Most High's house into their possession. Now we're looking at someone who is the Son of God that we never heard of. And now we have a European that's supposedly ruling over us from a spiritual realm, so to speak. So now we have someone who doesn't look nothing like us that's apparently ruling over us, when our strict commandment was we are not to allow any people other than of Israel, and those people who are of Israel are to be walking in this law to rule over us in any way, shape, or form. So this is where they took the Most High's house into their possession and sent out this picture of Caesar Borgia, or Borgia, depending how you wanted to pronounce this thing, who's nothing but the son of this one Roman Catholic Pope. So all this Christianity mess that we've been fed is nonsense, it's errors, it's strictly abomination that comes straight out of the Roman Catholic Church, because these Romans are the ones that ran through Palestine. Okay, ran through Zion, okay, ran through Israel, and scattered our people throughout the earth. So it was important that they instill this figure above us and cause us to actually worship and walk in this era. Verse 13, O my strength, make them like a wheel, as the stubble before the wind, as the fire burneth a wood, and as the flame setteth the mountains on fire. So persecute them with thy tempest, and make them afraid with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Yah. Verse 17. Let them be confounded and troubled forever. Yea, let them be put to shame and perish. Verse 18. That men may know that thou, whose name alone is Yah, there is no J at all in Hebrew, art the most high over all the earth. And I'm not going to get into any kind of contention with you over what the name of the most high is. Okay, we can do better than that. You walk in these laws, statutes, judgments, and precepts. All of this is going to be made clear to every one of us. Now, so we see clearly here where these nations have gotten in cahoots against the children of Israel. Now, let's deal with we know good and well what the Roman Catholic Church have done. We have just discussed it. Now, if you let them tell it and what the propaganda story is within the media and within the earth, you would think that the Jews and the Christians are somehow at odds. Remember, Christians are nothing but Romans. They're all under the same umbrella. Just that split happened, which is known as the Protestant Reformation, where we had the Roman Catholic Church got split in two. The Roman Catholic Church, and you have the Protestants. Okay? And the Protestant Church is all the many different denominations of Christianity. You name them all, they're all known as Protestants. They are the ones that rebelled against the Roman Catholic Church. Same doctrine, same idols, same foulness, same abomination. Now, when you deal with what we call the Jews, you would think that the Jews and the Christians are at odds. Now, the Jews were given what's known as a Talmud. You can't find anything pertaining to a Talmud in any of this text. It does not exist. Now, keep in mind that all of these, what you would call the Christian conservative, okay, all of these big Christian churches within the United States, okay, what they do, you would think that they are somehow in direct opposition to Jews. They are not. All of the money that they collect, they use that money to fund Israel. Let me say that again. All the conservative Christian groups, these are European Christian groups. Their money is made in an aggregate, it's all collected, and it's all sent to those people that's sitting in the land that call themselves Jews. If you are in opposition to people in that manner, you don't give them that amount of money each and every year. Now, let's look at those of us who are here paying taxes. Our tax money, there's a portion of money that's allocated to the Israeli government each and every year. They are paid. And the children of Israel, our money is used for that. So there's no such thing as some opposition between the Christians and the Jews. They're all in cahoots together. We just read these things in Psalms 83, that they are all in confederate together. That goes for the Chinese, that goes for the Russians, that goes for the Arabs. You would think that there's some kind of disconnect between an Arab and a Christian, between an Arab and a Catholic. It is not. You can pull up online anywhere and see where the Pope is kissing a Quran. You will see that. Okay? You will see where the Nation of Islam's founder, the founder or minister, where he will come to the children of Israel in a house of idol worship with both books. That's the level of his confusion. And there are those that follow that confusion. Okay, so we have individuals who are smart enough or foul enough to play both sides of the coin. And it cannot be done in this fashion. It is unacceptable. We have to know clearly exactly who our strength is and what the law was and is pertaining to us. We have to know what book to follow, and we must be able to be aware of when someone comes before us and he has two books. We are to know that he is not to be trusted, especially when he's speaking of things and enticing us to do things that we were instructed specifically not to do. So the Roman Catholic Church and the Arabs are in cahoots. The Jews and the Christian conservatives are in cahoots. And they're all in cahoots against you, Israel. So understand clearly who our enemies are and what their objective is in order to keep you cut off. Their main objective is to ensure that, number one, you don't know who you are. And when you begin to know who you are and speak out on it, their goal is to use the propaganda machine, i.e. the media, to try to suppress anything that you say when you decide or when we decide to step forth and claim our birthright. However, if we are walking in righteousness and we are walking in truth, anyone that decides they want to stand before us, they will lose, because to be defiant in the face of truth, truth is the Most High. No one has stood in defiance against the Most High and have won that battle. So therefore, when we step forth and we bring this righteousness, we bring forth this light to the Gentiles, we bring forth this truth to them, anyone that tries to stand in opposition to what we're saying and doing will fail, for the Most High will be before us. Therefore, they will not win. So this covers our enemies who have made it their business to be in confederate, to keep us cut off from the Most High, to keep us cut off from the knowledge of who we are, to keep us cut off from the knowledge of where we're from, to keep us cut off from the knowledge of who our strength and who our strong one is. This is what they set out to do. And obviously, they succeeded for a time. However, that time is up. And therefore, the Most High is pouring His Spirit out upon us, and He's showing Himself. The Most High is truth. So anytime when you see truth appear, if someone is convicted of something and it was unjust, the person didn't do it. Once they are vindicated because the truth was shown, it was revealed that they did not do it, there's joy in that. There's truth in that. There's righteousness in that. Because when the truth comes forth, that is the Most High showing Himself that He is ever present. So anytime you see someone who has, even if it's an investigator that's investigating a case, when the truth comes out, there's a feeling of righteousness. There's a feeling of that which is right. There's a feeling of contentment. There's a feeling of joy. There's a feeling of peace, because the Most High's law and His truth brings about peace. So anytime you're able to receive the truth in any form or fashion, it brings comfort to one's soul, and it will always be so, for that is what the Most High is. He is truth. So when we see truth and when we hear truth, that is the presence of the Most High. Now, let's discuss our enemies pertaining to all the children of Israel. To identify the children of Israel, the Most High dedicated an entire chapter listing out clearly exactly what He would do to the children of Israel. That way, it will be clear for us to understand who we are when we are spread into the midst of these many nations. And then when these other nations decide to say, hey, these Jews are the people of God, then we have to have some firepower to say, you know what? Okay, you believe that. Can we go into the text and can we bear witness to that and validate the words of the Creator? So that's what we'll do right now. We're going to go into the text. We're going to look at Deuteronomy chapter 28. And we're going to see if the Jews, the people that's sitting in the land right now, we're going to see if they are actually reflective of what the Most High prophesied that He would do to the sons and daughters of Jacob. All right. We will deal with Deuteronomy chapter 28. We're going straight to the curses because we are still in the many lands today because the curses are still in effect. And the only way the curses will be lifted and placed upon our enemies is when we return back on these laws. So we're still in the lands. We're still in the midst of our enemies. We're still walking after errors. after their ways, their customs, and their gods, aka their idols. So we're still in these lands. We're still wearing the names of our enemies, and we're still speaking the languages of our enemies. So now let's go and see all the different curses that was placed upon the children of Israel, and let's look and see if it pertains to the Israelis. All right, we'll start off at Deuteronomy chapter 28, and we'll deal with verse 15. And verse 15 reads, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Yahweh thy strength, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee." Verse 16, "Curse shall thou be in the city, and curse shall thou be in the field." Now, let's deal with this. Cursed in the city and cursed in the field. Within our cities, we can see many different murders and crimes, all types of wickedness in the midst of our city. In the fields, we were in fields, planting crops that we did not have the luxury of eating or profiting from. Okay, so you're not going to see where any quote unquote Jews have been in any farms, all right, planting anything. And when he planted it and he reaped that which he had sown, he wasn't able to profit from it. Okay, so that does not exist. Verse 17, "Cursed shall be thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be the fruit of thy body and the fruit of thy land, the increase of thy kind and the flocks of thy sheep." So the increase of our kind, all right, that would be our herds will be cursed. They will not multiply and increase like they should. Cursed shall be the fruit of our body. That would be our children. We know our children are rebellious. They're cursed. They're being locked up. They're disrespectful to the elderly. They're disrespectful to each other. They're disrespectful in such a manner that they're killing each other in these cities of ours. All right, they walk not in the way of the Most High. All right, so when we look at our children, we see all the things that are wrong within our nation. We see this curse right before our face. All right, verse 19, "Cursed shall thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shall thou be when thou goest out." Coming and going, we're finding the hardships no matter where we are. Okay, we can go to a new city, we can go to a new country. These curses pursue after us. We cannot outrun them. We cannot go hide someplace in a closet from them. Okay, they will pursue us no matter where we go. Verse 20, "Yah shall send upon thee cursing, vexation, and rebuke, in all that thou settest thine hand unto for to do, until thou be destroyed, and then until thou perish quickly because of the wickedness of thy doings, whereby thou hast forsaken me, because we have taken the Most High's laws, thrown it behind our back. This is why he is punishing us, and we are perishing in these nations." There is no such thing as a Jew being shot down in America. There is no such thing as a Jew being given a sentence longer than anyone else in this nation. There's no such thing as a Jew fighting for civil rights in this nation or any other nation. All right? And there's no thing as a Jew being destroyed in the midst of a group of people. I don't care where they're living. Okay? They are wealthy and they have influence and affluence in the places where they live. We do not. Verse 21, "Yah shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he have consumed thee from off of the land whither thou goest to possess it." So that goes for the land of Israel. When we were there, we got kicked out, and any other lands that we go to possess, these problems were going to afflict us. Verse 22, "Yah shall smite thee with a consumption, and with a fever, and with an inflammation, and with extreme burning, and with the sword," that's death, "and with blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish." Now, the sword, we are being killed in these many lands. When these nations that we're in goes to war, we are sent to the front lines. When the sentences are handed out in the courtrooms, we get the raw end of the deal. When the shots rang out or rings out with the police altercations, our sons are dead. So we're seeing how the sword is after us in the many nations, because we are the ones that ends up with no justice, and we're the ones that ends up dead, and we are the people fighting for civil rights. A reminder to the children of Israel: if you have to fight anyone for civil rights and they do not want to give it to you, or you have to fight them to get it, it is clear that they are not civil. It's not very hard to understand. Verse 23. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thy feet shall be iron, which means there will be no raining upon our crops for them to grow and to bring forth the increase of the earth. And the earth itself will not bring forth this increase to us. So in other words, you could plant some crops and it's not going to turn out well for you. The harvest is going to be poor. Okay. Verse 24. Yah shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. From heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. Once again, he will bring famines upon the earth where we dwell. Verse 25. Yah shall cause thee to be smit before thy enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them, and shalt be removed in all the kingdoms of the earth. Okay, the Most High is going to smite down the children of Israel when we go before our enemies. All right, now let's look at the Israelis. All right, are the Israelis being smitten before their enemies? The Israelis have one of the most potent lethal weapons arsenal in the quote-unquote Middle East. Their dependence is upon the nation of America and all the other European powers, because these European powers had taken them by way of the Theodore Herzl movement, the Zionist movement, and placed them in that land. Now also remember that them being in this land was not the first choice. They wanted to go to Uganda. They looked at a few other places in South America, etc., etc. But it is the European powers, it is the League of Nations, Britain, America, and the rest of them, that placed these people in this land. All right? All right. Now, removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. Can you show me where the Jews were removed into all the kingdoms of the earth? Now, what you can show clearly where the Jews have been expelled from several nations on the earth. A couple of these nations have pretty much kicked them out. Now, that goes against and flies in the face of prophecy. When the Most High removes you and puts you in a nation, can't no one kick you out. So the Most High put us in these nations. Why? For rigor, for punishment. That's why we were placed in the midst of these nations. And there's no way the Most High is going to put us in a nation and then the men or the people of that nation kick us out. Not happening. So, when you see that they have been kicked out of these nations, that flies in the face of prophecy, when the Most High stated he was going to scatter us into these nations. And then he stated that he was going to gather us out of these nations, which simply implies when he scattered us, no one was going to kick us out. So if they were kicked out of these lands that they were in and they immigrated there, they were not forced to go there. They were not in servitude when they went there. None of them were slaves to anybody. Most of them are sitting in these Eastern and Western European blocs. They have changed their names to sound quote unquote Jewish. These men are regular Europeans, and when they get to Israel, they change their names to something more quote unquote Jewish. But when you check their pedigree, and you look at their background, you realize their name is Latinsky or something like that. These are regular Europeans. And then they want to hide and disguise themselves, change their names, trying to fool someone. It's not working. So they were not removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. However, you can find where our people have been removed by force to all the nations of the earth, where we speak different languages throughout the whole entire earth. Verse 26, and thy carcass shall be meat unto all fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the field, and no man shall fray them away. So we would be dying in these streets, we would be dying in these nations, and there will be no hurry to gather our bodies. We saw this down in Katrina. Dead folks laying in the street for a week. Israelites. No one tending to the bodies. We have seen this. Verse 27. Yah will smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and with the emerods, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou canst not be healed. So we have had all manner of diseases upon us. If you check our people and you check our history, we are sick and we live. Our life expectancy is much shorter than our enemies who are around us. One reason for that is we are eating things that our enemies eat. Once we were brought into the lands of our enemies, we took on their ways, we took on their customs, we took on their quote-unquote God, who are their idols. And we also took on their dietary habits. We want to eat what we want to eat. Not good. And because we are eating that which our enemies are eating, it is making us sick. Entirely different bodies. Entirely different genome. We are not the same as our enemies. We are not to do as they do. We're certainly not to eat what they eat. Verse 28. Yah shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart. Madness and blindness, yes. When we see with our own eyes, as we bear witness to all the injustice that our people are enduring, not only here in America, but throughout the earth, that type of thing will drive a man mad, especially if you're dealing with a man that has any level of consciousness. He is aware of what's going on with his people, and he's not willing to play dumb when he sees the injustice of his people, and he is powerless to do anything to change that. That will certainly drive a man mad. The blindness. We were made deaf and blind. That's making you dumb. So we would be able to open this book and read it and not understand it. There was an important message in us not being able to read. Because the minute these people are able to read, then they will be able to go into this book and decipher it. So when they are able to read, we need to be able to instruct them on what to read and what not to read. So therefore, we must control the educational system. That way we can usher them and their minds in the way we would want them to go, think, act. All right. Verse 29. And thou shalt grope at noonday as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt be only oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. Groping, a blind man feels his way around, he's unable to see. Okay? We will not prosper because we're maneuvering around in darkness. Darkness is akin to sin. So, let's look at the Israelis. Are the Israelis oppressed by anyone? Are they spoiled by anyone? Is anyone robbing the Israelis right now? Is anyone oppressing Israelis right now? Are they fighting for some rights right now? Israelis are in any country. They're not. They're not oppressed by anyone. So they don't fit this curse. Verse 30. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build an house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. Now, what Jew, what Israeli, anywhere can say that he betrothed a wife and another man lied with her. I tell you what we can do. We can go check the records, the slave records, and see where slave masters laid down with the daughters of Zion, and the daughter of Zion was married to an Israelite man. We can check the slave records and we can verify that. All right. Now, shall build an house in another man. We are the builders and the carpenters of this nation and many other nations. We were used for the rigor, for the work, for the labor, for the building, and we built things that we were not allowed to live in. We could not dwell in. And we built this by force, for they executed this by way of the sword. So, can you identify anywhere where a Jewish man, an Israeli ever did any of this? Built a house and he couldn't live in it. An Israeli did that. Okay? That he planted a vineyard and he couldn't eat the grapes of that vineyard. Where is that? What Israeli did that, planted a vineyard, and he couldn't eat the grapes of the vineyard? Okay? He could not gather the grapes. Verse 13. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thine ass shall be violently taken away from before thy face, and shall not be restored to thee. Thy sheep shall be given unto thine enemies, and thou shalt have none to rescue them. Okay. Our lands were given unto our enemies. Our possession was given unto our enemies. The things that we had were violently taken away. Now, what is it that an Israeli has that was violently taken away? And he did not have the power to rescue them. Let's cover some of these things. Now, when they went in, the Germans, some more Europeans, killed some Jews, some more Europeans. So once the state of Israel was established by Europeans for Europeans, the Israelis decided to form a commando type style unit to go hunt down and kill all the Nazis that were killing them. So they have the power to retaliate to anyone that did harm unto them. That's past and that's present. So they had power within their hand to strike back at their enemies. That's the Israelis. However, us, the children of Israel throughout the diaspora, there is no might in our hand to strike back at our enemies. We don't have an army. We don't have planes, a squadron of planes. We don't have Secret Service agents that operate on our behalf to go strike back at the slave master and all those who were involved in slavery. We don't have that. And we will never have it, because the Most High said we won't have the strength or the power to have any of those things. Our strength is Him. All right. Verse 32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long. Let's not even go any further. Now, what Israeli had his son and his daughter, sons plural, not just one, had his sons and his daughters given unto another people? We know good and well that the sons and daughters of the children of Israel were given, stolen, and ripped away and taken away by other people to foreign lands, and we did not see our children again. That happened in the cases of plantations being shipped from one plantation to another, and that being ripped away from the nation of Israel and shipped throughout the whole entire earth, sending your children to other nations to serve them, that you may never see them again, and you had no might, no power in your hand by which to stop or strike back at our enemies. And we still don't. All right, let's go ahead and finish up that chapter. And there shall be no might in thine hand. So therefore, when they took our sons, when they took our daughters, and they were given unto another people. If you look back at the history of slavery, of all these European nations, these League of Nations, these foul nations, they're European, all of them. When you look at them, it was customary for them to give a gift of an Israelite child to their children. Hey, this is your slave for the rest of your life. This is your pet, pretty much. They will do whatever it is you want them to do for the rest of your life. You own them. So we were given as gifts to our enemies' children. You can't find an Israeli on this planet that can say that ever happened to him. Never happened. Verse 33. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be oppressed and cursed always. All right. Where is it that an Israeli planted some crops or did anything with the work of his hand and another nation just came by and just say, you know what, that's ours right now. We're going to take that. It's never happened. If we look through the history of America, we can see where the children of Israel, not Israelis, the children of Israel built cities, had farms, had land, had some bit of sustenance in which to sustain themselves. And our enemies came and took it away violently, and there was no power in our hands to retaliate. That is not just here in America. That has been done to us throughout the diaspora in the many nations in which we dwell. We have never had any bit of peace in the midst of our enemies, but we weren't supposed to have any. We were sent here on punishment. We're to be mindful of that. Verse 34. So that thou shalt be mad for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. It's going to tick you off when you turn on your news and 3-4 times a week you see your sons being victimized. You see your uncles being victimized. You're seeing your daughters getting their head slammed on the concrete by a grown man. These types of things will literally drive a man insane. The fact that our people have some level of mental stability is only by the grace of the Most High Yah. Because once you see these things, it's a repetitive conditioning, and that is what the media is used to do. It is used to condition the children of Israel, and this is what happens to you when you choose not to walk within the ways of this land that we run with our laws. So it is a reinforcement mechanism. That way you understand exactly how to act while in the midst of your enemies, because many of us fail to understand that we are in the midst of our enemies and we are in a state of war. Now, verse 35. Thou shalt smite thee in the knees and in the legs with a sore boss that cannot be healed, from the sole of thy feet unto the top of thy head. Verse 16. Yah shall bring thee in the king, the governor, which thou shalt set over thee unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known. And there shalt thou serve other idols, gods, lowercase, wood and stone. So those who have been our governors, those who have been captains of the people, when we got shipped out, the governor got shipped out too. Look at Shalom. All right, when he got shipped out. All right, look at all of those governors when they got removed. The people got removed, the governor got removed too. All right, so our governors got kicked out with us. We're in lands that we are unfamiliar. We are in the midst of people whose customs and their gods and their ways are unfamiliar to us. And we were forced to serve their idols, and their idols are nothing but vanity, the work of men's hands, great errors. Verse 37. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither Yah thy strength shall lead thee. They have got a name for us. I don't care where you go. Y'all know those names they've got for us. There are plenty. And it doesn't matter what nation that we go into. We are mocked. There's a name for us. And we are not held in high esteem. Verse 38. Thou shalt carry much seed out into the field, and shalt gather but little in, for the locust shall consume it. So when we plant our crops and we think we're going to have a good harvest, it's looking good right now, the locust comes, eats it up. So the Most High put us in a position to where we will always be in a state of want. There will not be a state of contentment. There will not be a state of satisfaction. There will not be a state of peace in these lands. For we had peace when we had the Most High and we rejected it. Verse 39. Thou shalt plant vineyards and dress them, but shalt not drink of the wine, nor gather the grapes, for the worms shall eat them. So we're going to plant these vineyards and we're going to dress them, but shall neither drink of the wine nor gather the grapes, for the worms shall eat them. Once again, he's going to eat up our crops. This brings about famine. And that's why in the siege, we had to eat our children. I want you to kind of imagine what that's like, okay? Or what that would be like. It's very hard to kind of imagine a scene that dire. Verse 40. Thou shalt have olive trees throughout all thy coast, but thou shalt not anoint thyself with the oil, for thine olive shall cast his fruit. So before the fruit can actually become ripe to where it can be of use, the trees are just going to drop them on the ground to where there will be no use to us. Okay, so once again, Most High will kill you by starving you to death. All right. So the dearth is one means of weaponry that the Most High will use. Verse 41. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Now, when we read this text and we read these curses, it doesn't matter what year that we read them in. Once the Most High has removed the blindness from our eyes that we can see, removed the deafness from our ears that we can hear, and remove the fatness from our hearts that we can understand. Once we go into this book and we read it, and we have removed that stumbling block from before our face, and we have taken that idol out of our heart, then he allows us to see and understand. He allows us to hear. He increases our wisdom. And so now we can read this text, have a clear understanding of it, and be able to look up and bear witness that we can see in the midst of ourselves or in the midst of the nations that can pretty much validate this word. So now, what we will do is, let's look and see, can you speak to your grandfather, your father, your great-grandfather? Can we pull up any type of documentation from the past history of America, England, Spain, Russia, Germany, and all these other places? Can we pull up any text where we can see our people had sons and daughters, and we could not enjoy them, for they were taken into captivity by other people? Can we verify that? We sure can. Now the next question is, can a Jew, can an Israeli go back 5 generations ago, 3 generations ago, and pull up any record anywhere stating that he was enslaved by anyone, that he was forced to speak a language that he did not know, and that he was forced to wear the name of his enemies? Can an Israeli present any information, any documentation today or ever where any of those things ever occurred, where his children were snatched from him and given to other people? You can't find no Israeli or no Jew that was captured by any black person and they were renamed Tyrone Willis, Tyrone Williams. Can't find it. Never happened. Verse 42. All thy trees and fruit of thy land shall the locust consume. Famine, dearth. Verse 43. The stranger that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. Now let's analyze that. Look in the midst of our people, and you will see no matter where we are, when the Chinese show up, they prosper. When the Koreans show up, they prosper. When the Arabs show up, they prosper. When the East Indians show up, they prosper. When the Mexicans and the Hispanics show up, they prosper in the midst of us. So they are lifted up high, we are brought down very low. And they are strangers, more than likely, more often than not. They just got to the land that we are dwelling in. They are mostly newcomers to these many different places. But the European man is very slick. He has made the immigration laws to where he can maneuver freely in the midst of his own people. Germany to England, England to France, France to America. You almost don't need no visa. You can walk into these nations. Let an Israelite try that, and they will stop him in his tracks. But there's free movement between these European powers, between these European nations. Why? They understand clearly they are the same people, and they understand clearly in order for them to maintain their grip upon the earth and keep this wickedness in place, it's imperative that they stick together, and that they do. So we see clearly where the stranger. Now, find me a stranger that has gone to Israel that's not an Israeli, that's prospered above all Israelis in the midst of Israelis. Never happened. Find me a stranger that moved into a Jewish neighborhood and he rose up above the Jews that were around him. He got more wealthy, he had more stores, and the Jewish people actually went and bought from him. Never happened. So this is where we're going to lay it out plain and see if they match these curses when they decide to speak, stating that they're the people of the Most High. Verse 44. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. So the curses state, the prophecy states that the children of Israel will not have the financial means to be power brokers. We will not have the means to lend to anyone. We will not have those means. We will not have those finances to do the lending. Our enemies were going to lend to us. We were not allowed to lead because when we were given a chance of leadership, we are, and our position still is, to be the head of the nations. We are the earth's priests, and we are the judges of the earth. That is our job. But we were, you know what? I don't want to do that which is right. I want to join my enemies. I want to do what they do. We continue to seek for freedom, but the freedom that we seek is the freedom to do whatever it is we want. We are seeking freedoms that our enemies possess. Our enemies are lawless. They have no laws. They have no parameters by which they live. There is no confinement to their actions, and they want to do what they want to do with impunity. However, in the house of Israel, we're not allowed to do whatever we want to do. There are punishments. We have to move within a certain corridor, and people don't like that. So many of us want to move into the lands of our enemies so we can have the freedom of our enemies, and that freedom is the freedom to do what we want. That freedom is the freedom to walk and run amok of the Most High's law. So we're to be careful when we start speaking about freedoms. We just want to do what our enemies do. And that is not freedom. That is known as lawlessness, wickedness, absolutely no parameters. So you should not be shocked when you see the ways of our enemies are lawless and without boundaries. That's what they call freedom. And that's what we're beginning to seek after. And it will destroy us. Now, so let's look at who owns the banks. Let's look at who runs the Fed. The Fed chairman is always a Jew. Look at their history. They control the monies of America and of the nations. We do not have that financial power. We do not have it. This is what we're reading out of the scrolls. So, if they have the financial power, if they have the means in which to hit back at nations that have done harm to their people, then clearly it's not them. That's not what the prophecy states. If they have the power to lend to people, if they have the power to finance wars, excuse me, if they have the power to finance campaigns for politicians, if they have the power to have silos of nuclear weapons sitting in the Sinai Peninsula, sitting out in Dimona, if they have the power to manufacture mass weaponry and sell it to other people, certainly they can't be the children of Israel, because the prophecy doesn't state that is possible. Next, chapter 45. Excuse me, not chapter 45, verse 45, the 45th verse. So we understood clearly here in the 44th verse that we will be the tail, meaning we will be led, and we will be led astray down the path that's dark and slippery, wickedness, and we will not lead. And certainly we see that the Israeli is leading. He has power and influence in the U.S. government, in the British government, in the French government, in the Arab governments, and anywhere else. He has the ability to fund them. He has the ability to defund them. He has the power to smear them via his media outlets. The children of Israel, us gathered here or scattered here in the diaspora, we have no such finances. We have no such reach. It can't be done. The Most High has stripped us of everything. We are powerless in the midst of the nations. We can't strike back at our enemies financially or militarily. We don't make any weapons of war. All right. Verse 45. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of Yah thy strength, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. So the reason why all of this is happening to the children of Israel is because we refuse to walk in adherence to this law. Verse 46. And they shall be unto thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed, that's our children, forever. Okay, so all these curses are going to be upon the children of Israel for a sign. What does a sign do? If you're driving down the road, it'll tell you Greenville, 2 miles. Spartanburg, 25 miles. Columbia, 90 miles. Atlanta, 90 miles. A sign gives you a direction. It points to something, or it points to someone. So the Most High is stating here that these curses shall be upon us for a sign, to point out who we are, and for a wonder, to make people say, huh. And it shall be upon us and upon our children. So let's verify that. Can we verify that the same beat downs and the shootings and the killings we seeing now in 2000, we saw it a decade ago? We saw the same ugliness a decade before that. The same things we're marching for today we did 50 years ago. The same struggles that we have today in the midst of ourselves and in the midst of our enemies. We have those same struggles in plight today. And this has been a sign upon us and upon our children, regardless of the nation in which we dwell. And that points out clearly that we are the house of Israel. And no one, Jewish, Israeli, or otherwise, can state clearly that they actually fit these curses. And they can prove this generation after generation, where their grandfather, their great-grandfather, and 10 generations ago, and this present generation can attest and bear witness to the same exact thing. Now, verse 47. Because thou servest not Yah thy strength with joyfulness and with gladness of heart, for the abundance of all things. So we are supposed to serve the Most High in righteousness and in truth. And for all things that we seek, for all things that we desire and want, that's within the confines of the Most High's law, he would deliver it to us, i.e. peace within our lands, peace within our homes, no violence in our lands, no homosexuality in our lands, no murders in our lands, no liars and thieves in our lands, no lesbians in our lands, no wife swapping in our lands, no pedophilia in our lands, no idolatry in our lands. All of these are walking in the strict commandments of the Most High. And we did not want to serve him with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things. We didn't want to do that. It's the Sabbath. You're supposed to be at home. You're supposed to be at rest. You're not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath day. And the Most High has laws in place in these nations to make sure that if you want to keep his law with your whole heart and your whole soul, and you want to keep his Sabbath day in all of his feast days, he's made it possible to where you can do it and they cannot touch you. However, we didn't want to do that. It's a Sabbath day, man. I'm going to go make this money. That's the position of the children of Israel. Even on the Sabbath day in the land, they are now considering to shut down some transport in the land right now. So they're still doing certain things in the land that they're not supposed to do on Shabbat, on the Sabbath day. All right, we're going to get to all that other stuff later. Let's deal with 28 right now. Verse 48. We're still dealing with Deuteronomy chapter 28. Verse 48 reads, Therefore shall thou serve thine enemies, which Yah shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst, in nakedness and in want of all things, and he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. Let's reread that again for effect. Verse 48 of Deuteronomy chapter 28. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies. Now, have you seen where an Israeli is serving an Arab? Where is that? Where is an Israeli serving an Israelite? Where is an Israeli serving a quote-unquote, what you would call the term, a black man? Where is that happening? Where can you show me that Israelis are serving their enemies? Can you show me where they are in a role of servitude? Show me that today. Show me that last year. Show me that 10 years ago. Show me that 100 years ago, where they are in servitude to anyone. All right. Show me where the Most High send enemies against them. Our enemies are all the peoples of the nations. We have read this in Psalms 83. So the only people that the Jews can point to as their enemies would be the Germans. The Germans put us in camps and killed 6 million of us. And that 6 million number is grossly exaggerated. It pales in comparison to the death and the struggles of the true house of Israel scattered throughout the diaspora in the slave trade, both the Atlantic slave trade as well as the sub-Saharan African slave trade, where we were traded by those Arabs, and we read clearly where the Arabs were in cahoots with these Edomites. Now, y'all shall sin against our enemies. So we see our enemies are against us left and right. In hunger, and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he have destroyed thee. Now, wherever in history has a yoke of iron been placed upon the neck of an Israeli or placed upon the neck of a Jew, we can pull up documentations where while we were enslaved in these many nations, that there was a yoke of iron placed upon our necks. We can show you that. There's documentation of it we can present to you right now. And that is the power of the Most High's words. He stated clearly, Israel, you are my witness. So when I wake you up and I place my spirit upon you and you go into this book, the book of remembrance, I'm going to bring all these things to mind. You're going to know where to look. And not only that, when you look, you will clearly understand that which you see. Because I've stated before in some of these videos, people can look at a thing, I see it, but I have no idea what it is. But once the Most High puts His Spirit upon us, and we go into this book, not only will we be able to see, but we will be able to discern exactly that which we're looking at. I see it and I clearly understand it. All right. So they will have a yoke of iron upon our necks until we have been destroyed. All right, we are to that level to where we have been destroyed. We're running around thinking that we are other people. We're running around speaking the languages of other people. We're running around eating the foods of other people. We're running around following the customs of other people. We're running around following the gods of other people. Our women are running around putting on the hair of other people on their heads. This is the level of our madness, the level of our ignorance, and the level of confusion of face. And this is problematic in the house of Israel. So we'll be serving our enemies for the want of all things. Let's get the rundown of that. Which means we will be in power to control nothing. And we will serve our enemies for the want of all things. Anything that we want, we're going to have to serve them to get it. We're going to have to go to them to get it. We're not going to own and control nothing. That's why we are in this state of flux. Dr. Anderson I love Dr. Anderson. He's really a brilliant brother that's trying to do the best for his people, to present to them why they're in the flux that they're in. But there's a biblical context to all of what he's teaching that he clearly does not understand. But from a general viewpoint, he is sound. He understands clearly the ways of his enemies and how he feels they can best be counteracted or battled against. However, the one factor that's missing in here that he does not understand is the Yah factor, the Most High factor, and why these things are happening to us. So let's take a look at us depending upon our enemies for the want of all things. We will have to depend upon them for the want of all things because they control everything. So if you want a job, you've got to go to your enemies. If you want some water, your enemies control the water companies. You want the power turned on in your house, your enemies. You want to buy a car, they run the car companies. You want some gas, your enemies own the power companies to the gas companies. You want tires for your car, they're the ones cutting the rubber down in the trees. They're the ones that have the tire factories. You get sick and you need some medication, your enemies are the ones that run the pharmacies. It is their scientists that's making all these drugs, most of which will make us sick if it doesn't flat out kill us. The clothes you wear, it's your enemies that manufacture them. It's their boats that transport them. It's their planes that transport them. If you're looking for a job, you're sitting in front of your enemies at that interview, hoping that he would have some mercy upon you and give you a job. If you want some time off, you have to go to him to get it. So, the want of all things. You want a loan? Well, guess what? Your enemies and those who have conspired against you are the ones that owns the bank. You think you're rich? Any Israelite man that thinks he's rich, you name any celebrity, he thinks he's rich, he's foolish. You can't possibly think you're rich when your enemies are in possession of your money in their banks. So you cannot possibly put your money in your enemy's banks and turn around with a straight face and tell anyone that you're rich. Because whenever he feels like it, that money is no longer yours. So everything that we desire, we have to turn to our enemies for it. If you decide to marry someone, for that to be legit, it has to be done in the courtroom of our enemies, signing the documents that our enemies have printed up for us. We can do nothing in the midst of these lands without our enemies being a direct overseer of all of our actions. That includes when we raise or discipline our children. In fact, as it pertains to our children, those of you of the house of Israel, when you're teaching your children, you better make sure you start teaching your children this law at a very young age. I'm talking before they're 5. That way they understand that a man is supposed to be with a woman, and that a man and a woman is what makes a child when the Most High blesses them. Because if you do not start teaching these things early, they will start teaching it for you in these schools. It is important that our enemies control the educational system, because they control how you think. If they control how you think, they will also control how you act. So they are in control of everything, and we are to turn to them for the need of everything. You need surgery, you got to go to this man. Need a job, need some time off, you need some gas, you need a new tire, you need to catch a plane. He's flying them, he owns them, he builds them. You need to go buy you a gun that you think you need to protect yourself with. Oh, he makes those guns. You need some bullets, he makes those bullets too. You want to go play sports, you can go play sports, he owns the team. And wherever it is you're playing, he owns the arena. So you cannot escape these curses. You can't outrun them. And you're going to have to rely on this man for the want of all things. Just to make that clear. Verse 49. Yah shall bring a nation against thee from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. When these Romans came and busted us over the head and put a siege on Zion in Jerusalem, we didn't know who these people were. These people are speaking a language we do not understand. These people are violent like you read about, and you still see their violence today. So these nations are coming. Look at these nations that have these eagles as their coat of arms. These are violent nations, ruthless nations, nations bent upon war and violence. That is their way. That is the language that they understand. Now, verse 50, a nation of fierce countenance. They're violent, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. Our enemies then and now, they will kill a 5-year-old. They will kill a 95-year-old. They had no regards in working our 5-year-old from dark to dark, and they had no compassion in working our 95-year-old from dark to dark. Young man, old man, same treatment. They will beat up an older Israelite just as fast as they beat up a young one. They show no differentiation between an old one and a young one, a man or a woman. They will beat up, punch, slam, and shoot our women just like they will our men. They have no compassion. And you are to remember that when dealing with them. All right. They're of a fierce countenance. We've read that, verse 50, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. Verse 51, and he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of thy kind, or of thy flocks, until he have destroyed thee. So everything you have, he's going to take. You've got wine, let's get that. You got some fruit over here, let's get that. I'm taking everything you have to where you will not have enough to sustain yourself or your family. I'm going to starve you to death. I'm going to take all you've got. Okay, you're a sharecropper. I know you made this agreement that we're going to split this thing, but guess what? You're not getting none of this. There's no thank you involved. You've already picked this cotton. I'm going to take this thing and you can just go back to your hut. You're not getting anything. Okay, so they were not at all going to share anything with you or at all give you any type of equitable judgment. It was not going to happen because you had all of these things and you disregarded it. Verse 55, 52, excuse me. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trusted throughout all thy land, and he shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which Yah thy strong one hath given thee. So we were going to be beaten down. We were going to be under siege in all the land that the Most High gave us in the land of Canaan. And we are besieged yet in the many nations that we dwell in today. You're walled off in the midst of these nations. They've got it to where it's a one way in, one way out where we live. They've got it to where we have been redlined to where in the areas that we live predominantly, those areas do not get and gain the same equity year over year as our enemies. So many of us are forced to go live in the midst of our enemies, because if we buy a home in the midst of our enemies, we can at least gain some appreciation of equity and value in the house. Also, we have enemies within. So many of us are forced to go live in the midst of our enemies because we have no peace in the midst of ourselves. For there are wicked men in the midst of us who are enemies unto us, who will trouble us. All of these are things for you to digest. Now, let's deal with verse, one second, verse 53. Verse 53, and thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which Yah thy strong one giveth thee, in the siege and in the straitness, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee. So imagine that we were in such distress that we had to eat our children. That's unimaginable to me. Okay? But can you just fathom that? That it would get that bad, and the Most High made it that bad that we would have to eat our children. That's punishment for you. Verse 54, so that the man that is tender among you, and very delicate, his eyes shall be evil towards his brother, and toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. Now, so the brother that is tender-hearted, the brother that has love for his people, the brother that had the Most High's law in his heart, that man would all of a sudden just turn rogue. He would change because of the situation that he was placed under, that weight. That delicate man, all of a sudden, he's going to have an evil eye towards his brother, but it wasn't that way before. All right? And he would have an evil eye also towards the wife of his bosom. This is why the brothers have problems with each other. That's why we have contention with our wives. And that's why we have contention with our children. Because the Most High put a different spirit upon us in the midst of our families, ripped it apart. Verse 55, so that he will not give to any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat. So you're eating and your brother want an arm or a leg of your child and you won't give it to them. Fathom that for a second. It's kind of tough to do. All right? Because he has nothing left in the siege and in the straitness, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in all thy gates. So a man is going to be eating his child, and he's not going to even think about, I'm eating this human being. This is wrong. This is foul. And then his wife going to ask for a piece, or his brother might want to have a piece of that child that he's eating. He won't even have some compassion in his heart to give it to them. Imagine that. Verse 56. The tender and delicate woman among you, which would not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness, her eye shall be evil towards her husband of her bosom, and toward her son, and toward her daughter. So, the woman that is kind-hearted, she is delicate. She will not do anything wrong to harm herself, to harm or her family, or to bring dishonor to her husband and her house. She's going to go rogue. Her eye is going to be evil towards her husband, and it's going to be evil towards her son, and evil towards her daughter. And that's why you see the madness that you see in the midst of our people. Do you see any of this that you see in the midst of our people, in the midst of Israeli people, or in the midst of Jewish people? Verse 57. And towards her young one that cometh out from between her feet, and towards her children which she shall bear. For she shall eat them for want of all things secretly in the siege and straitness, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee in thy gates. So when we were distressed, and we were cut off, and the gates were barred up, and we could not come and go, and we were literally surrounded by enemies, they starved us in the city. We were not able to eat, and it got so bad that we had to eat our children. Now, verse 58. If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and fearful name, Yah thy strength. Verse 59. Then Yah will make thy plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed, even great plagues, and of long continuance, and sore sickness, and of long continuance. So as we continue to not walk after this law, here come these plagues, and these plagues are going to last longer. This verse is important because when plagues are mentioned to the children of Israel, to our people, some of them want to get slick out the mouth. Their thinking is, well, we've seen plagues before. They had the plague, the flu of 1918. We had this, we had that, we had that. And they are correct in pointing out that we have had all these plagues before, these epidemics before, pandemics before. But keep in mind what the prophecy states. They will be of long continuance. And the Most High punishes the house of Israel from generation to generation. So therefore, we should not be shocked if we are in the same exact behavior as generations past, that we would see a repeat and a resurgence of these plagues and these curses. I hope that makes sense to someone. Verse 60. Moreover, he will bring upon thee all the diseases of Egypt, which thou was afraid of, and they shall cleave unto thee. There are some diseases that's inherent to our people, that cleaves unto our people, that we seem to have generation after generation and can't figure out why. Prophecy makes it clear. Verse 61. And every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will Yah bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. So all these plagues that we've never heard of, never seen, he's going to bring up upon us. What is he doing? The Most High is purging the rebels. That's one. He's purging the rebels, but moreover, what he's doing, he's taking these words and he's making us bear witness to it in real time. Verse 62. And ye shall be left few in number, whereas ye were as the stars of heaven for multitude, because thou wouldest not obey the voice of Yah thy strength. So we will be left few in number. That's that third that's going to come through the fire. A third of us. The rest going to have to kill them off because they refuse to turn. All right. So we will be made few in number. All right. And we were as the sand for multitude, or as the stars of the sea. And you can't find anywhere where Jewish people have ever been in those numbers. You can't find it. So you can find where we were actually more in number. And even so, the Most High did say he would bless us, and we will be as the sand of the sea. So you're seeing our people beginning to multiply as well, and that's a good thing. All right, now, verse 63. And it shall come to pass that as Yah rejoiced over thee to do good and to multiply you, so Yah will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught. And ye shall be plucked from off the land whether thou goest to possess it. So it doesn't matter what land we go to. The Most High looked over us and he was pleased with us to bless us. But he's also going to bruise us because he understands that correction is what's going to bring us back to him. And that's going to allow us to save ourselves. That way he doesn't destroy us all. Verse 64. And Yah shall scatter thee among all people. Jewish people were not scattered among all people. Jewish people, the Israeli, immigrated into the midst of other nations. We were taken there by force. Once again, verse 64. And Yah shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. So here we are in all of these nations, serving other gods that we have not known, even wood and stone. A shout out to Christianity. We're doing that. Kissing a stone at Mecca. We're in these nations doing all manner of madness. So we were going to be scattered into these nations, and we're serving gods that we have not known. Okay. So are we doing that? Can we attest that the children of Israel, if you look throughout the diaspora, you will find a brother doing some spirit madness. You'll find a brother doing some Catholicism. You'll find a brother that's a Seventh-day Adventist. You'll find a brother that's a witness. You'll find a brother that's a Baptist. You'll find a brother that's a Muslim. You may find a brother real crazy that's a Hindu. And you'll find a brother that's a, what do you call this thing? That's into Scientology now. There's a new religion out, okay? And all these other manner of madness. So we were going to be in these nations serving all this other madness. Now, when you find a Jew, when you find an Israeli, and you look what he's doing in the midst of these nations, he's in Judaism. That's what he's doing. He's serving what he's always done, is Judaism. They are not grabbing a hold of all the different vanities of the nations. So this prophecy does not line up well with them, doesn't fit them. Verse 65. And among these nations thou shalt find no ease. I don't care where you are. If you're in these nations and you're an Israelite, you've got hard times. Your health is bad. Your money's problematic. Problems with your families. Problem with your children. Problem with your enemies. We're being shot down by our enemies. We can't find justice within the lands of our enemies. The laws that we have to face are written by our enemies. and they show no favor towards us in their legal system. So there's no ease in the midst of these lands. If you're pulled over by the law, you have to be careful what you say and what you do, or you might not make it to your home that night. You may be killed. And those who killed you, your enemies, will get away scot-free. So your life is always in the balance, and there is no ease with you. That goes for your job and everything else that you do. Neither shall the sole of thy foot find rest. You're going to be tormented in these nations. But Yah shall give thee give thee there in these lands of your enemies. He's going to give you a trembling heart, and failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind. In other words, this is going to be a miserable time for us. And we can attest, when we look at how we're living and the things we can do and are doing versus what our enemies are doing, they have got us in a state of misery. We can attest to that. A trembling heart, fearful, worryful, stressed out in the midst of these nations, trembling, afraid. All right. Verse 66, and thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear day and night, and shall have none assurance of thy life. So we're constantly fearful of different things. Fearful I'm going to lose my job. Fearful when my son gets in the car and go driving. Fearful for my children when they go to the school of my enemies. Fearful for everything. I'm fearful for the enemies within, and I'm fearful for the enemies without. I have no peace in these lands. That's what was given to us. Okay? Verse 67. In the morning thou shalt say, would Yah it were even. And at even thou would say, would Yah it were morning. So we're gonna in the evening, we're gonna, man, I wish it was morning. And in the morning, man, I wish it was evening. We cannot be satisfied. We cannot be pleased with hot or cold, day or night. Either one of the circumstances that we're in or the nation that we're in, it will not be favorable to us. Okay? All right. So we're there at verse 67. Okay? In the morning thou shalt say, would Yah it were evening, and at even thou shalt say, would Yah it were morning. For the fear of thine heart, wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see. The misery that we see, the Trayvon Martins, we're seeing those, okay, and all the other brothers that's being killed, our children, our elderly, and our enemies are not punished for it, okay? So there's no assurance for and of our lives. There's no value for it. There's no respect for it. And we're seeing this before our very face each and every day. This is to actually reinforce and to substantiate the words of Yah. He is repaying you to your face, and you're bearing witness to it, because a witness sees. There's no such thing as you getting judgment when you're dead. A dead man knows nothing. A dead man feels nothing. Correcting a dead man is no good. He is dead and stinking. And that's it. He's not coming back, and he's not going up into heaven. These are all myths. Verse 68. And Yah shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy thee. All right. So no man shall buy, redeem you. No one is going to rescue you. No one died for you. Therefore, no one is coming to save you. You save yourself by returning unto this law. Now, We were sold unto our enemies as bondmen and women. We're reading this text. So when you look at this text, I want you to understand, when you see these sons of the slave master staring you in the face at your job and everywhere else that you go, you need to understand clearly these are your enemies. These are the sons and daughters of your enemies. It is them, the slave master from 1502. That's him in your grocery store. That's your boss. And the people that you're looking at right now is the same exact seed. It is his genes. It's the same person. I want you to understand that. So don't think when they tell you, man, I'm not responsible for this and that. Yes, you are. You are the seed of your father. You're nothing but a generation from him. You're the exact copy of him. Genetically, you're the same. And that's why the Most High is able to punish us from generation to generation. I don't punish you now. I punish your son in the next generation. I'm still punishing you. Same seed, same gene. All right? So we see clearly here that we were sold unto our enemies. Now, can an Israeli show me where he was sold to anyone? We can go through records in America, in every other nation on this earth, and show you where our people were enslaved and sold to their enemies throughout the earth. We can show you that. We can show you where our names were placed, were taken away, and we can show you where the names of our enemies were placed upon us. Therefore, we are wearing the names of the Europeans. We're wearing the names of the Spaniards, the names of the English, the names of the French, the names of the Dutch, the names of the Italians, who are Romans. So, we can show you where we are actually wearing these people's names. We can show you where our families, they are manifest, where we were taken into ships into these many different nations, dispersed throughout the countries and abused and continue to be abused today. So if an Israeli can pull up a manifest and show me the many nations where his people were taken into slavery and where his name was changed to Tyrone Jenkins, I'd like to see that. But he cannot contend with what's being said because he does not have anything to contend with. It's hard to contend against the Most High and his truth and his word. So therefore, this whole Deuteronomy chapter 28, from verse 15 all the way down to 68, it makes it plain exactly who the children of Israel are. A sign was placed upon them. That way we can clearly identify who they are. Now, that is for the stranger that seeks to find out who the children of Israel is. They can come to this chapter. But this was written for us. As we were brought to remembrance and we went into this book and we read this chapter, then everything will come flowing back to us. And we will be able to look at our current circumstance and look back several generations ago and pull all the records of these nations and verify this text. So, the Israeli, the Jew, does not fit any of these curses that the Most High states plainly that would be placed upon his people for a sign and for a wonder. A sign points to something. So when we look at all these signs and we look at who it points to the children of the diaspora, of the slave trade, transatlantic, and of the sub-Saharan slave trade. And keep in mind, there are children of Israel living in the land today. And there are children of Israel, Israelites, living in the many nations of Africa today. As we are scattered in Central, South, and Latin America, in the Caribbean, and in the Americas as a whole. So, this identifies the children of Israel. You carefully look over this and see if they are at the mercy of their enemies. See if they have been enslaved. See if their children were taken away from them. See if they were placed in the midst of some people and everyone rose up above them and they stayed at the bottom. We see clearly they have military might. We don't. They've got some money and run the banks. We don't. They have affluence and influence in the midst of nations and nations' cabinets. We don't. They have a prime minister. Most High never had that. And we're going to cover all of this. They have something similar to a Roman Senate. It doesn't state that when we were established back in the land that it would ever be that. So we're going to cover that. So we will stop right here. We will leave it at Deuteronomy chapter 28, covering that we can clearly see exactly who the children of Israel are. And we will do a part 3, probably a 4 and 5. I've got to lay this thing down. There's a whole lot of scripture to cover and a whole lot of things to point out. I can't just do it in 2 segments or in 2 lessons. So this is an hour and 45 minutes long, just covering this chapter. So next, we will cover those that's in the land. We'll look at what they're doing, all the things that they are doing as far as manufacturing weapons, having homosexual parades, actually petitioning nations to be on their behalf, sending mercenaries to go and kill people, and all the other things that they're doing. We're going to see if any of that, killing, let's discuss that clearly, killing the Ethiopians that are supposed to be Jews, killing them, sterilizing them, locking them up, and marginalizing them. Is that part of the prophecy for when the Israelites returned there? We're going to take a closer look at that in the series and the segments to come. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. This segment or this lesson was specifically for the children of Israel to be able to look through the scrolls, look through the records, and see if when you look at this chapter that the Most High had laid out, putting the curses upon his people, that these curses may be a sign upon them, that they may recognize who they are, and that the nations may recognize who they are. You take these signs and these wonders and put it up against quote unquote black people that's been scattered throughout the diaspora, and take it and put it up against the quote unquote Jews, and tell me who you think fits them. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. Man of Israel, continue to live this word, that those around you may know that this law can be done, that they may know that the way in which they should walk, that is right. Continue to face Jerusalem. Lift your hands in prayer. Give the Most High no rest, that he may come return and gather us out of the many nations in which he has scattered us, and place us back into the land that he had promised unto our forefathers, that we may build that third temple that the Jews cannot, and that the law may go forth from Zion, and the Europeans tell you it will not. There ain't no law. And at no time will we be going into a Talmud. We got this law. So they cannot build this third temple because the children of Israel are not in that land. There are no Levites among them. And when we return back to this land, there will be no war, neither will there be weapons of war. And we know they got the silos there. We know we have all kind of wars in the earth right now. We know we have all types of weapons manufacturers right now. So that little simple tidbit tells us those are not the people of the Most High. They're not the sons and daughters of Jacob. Peace, Israel. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law is the truth. Peace, Israel.